Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's reviews, formerly known as Senator Vreenak's episode top 10s. In this video, at long last, I finally finish up giving my top 10 favorite episodes of Star Trek series. I started with the original series over 3 years ago, and I had planned to do all 5 series within a couple of months, but then I got busy. After doing the original series and Next Generation with a couple of months of each other, I didn't do Deep Space Nine until a year later, and after that I completely abandoned the project until I noticed a lot of people were watching my videos and commenting, and a few even subscribed. So I came back to YouTube this year and rebranded my channel and started with my Voyager top 10. Now, several months later, I'm finally ready to finish it off with my Enterprise top 10. However, this isn't the end. I plan on doing more Star Trek videos in the future. So let me start off by being completely honest and saying I'm not a huge fan of Star Trek Enterprise. It is by far my least favorite Star Trek series. In fact, I would put it far below the previous 4 series, and the only reason I paid any mind is because it bears the name Star Trek. However, I will admit to completely loving the direction the show took in the 3rd and 4th seasons, and I think it proclaimed itself as a good TV series regardless of what name it has. But before I celebrate its best moments, let me start out with its worst and state my bottom 5 worst episodes of Enterprise. Number 5 is Vanishing Point. In the first couple of seasons, I found Hoshi to be a really annoying character, and this episode is the height of her annoyingness. In a cliched storyline that offers nothing new about someone facing their phobia, the annoying level was pushed to the max for this episode. Number 4 is Breaking the Ice. Oh, sorry, I fell asleep just thinking about this episode. The writers of this episode have some funny ideas about what makes entertaining television. Nothing really happens other than studying a comet, something goes wrong, blah blah blah, the Vulcans are being dicks, blah blah blah, oops, I'm asleep again. Number 3 is Oasis. Again, I have to question who pitched this episode. I imagine it was something like this. So do you remember that mediocre episode of Deep Space Nine called Shadow Play, where Odo and Dax go to a strange planet and discover everyone there is a hologram? Well, let's do that again, but only less interesting. It's not a good idea, and it's not a good episode. Number 2 is Dawn. Okay, so the pitch for this episode had to go like, do you remember that mediocre episode of The Next Generation called The Enemy, where Geordi gets stuck on a planet with a Romulan and they have to work together to get out of it? Which in itself was a huge ripoff of the film Enemy Mine, which in itself was based off of a whole lot of other similar stories. Well, let's do that again. But this time, let's put Commander Tucker on the planet and make him really annoying. It'll be awesome. I must question the sanity of the first and second season writers. And the episode that actually manages to top all the unbelievably bad and unoriginal writing to be my number 1 worst episode of Star Trek Enterprise is Precious Cargo. Okay, pitch time again. Do you remember that original series episode, Elan of Troyes? That was actually a bad and annoying episode in itself. Let's do that again, but let's crank up the annoying factor by like 50 by having a completely annoying diva where listening to her whine makes you want to shoot yourself in the head. And again, let's put her with Trip, because you know he's not annoying at all. And make an unoriginal and boring episode that's so bad audiences would rather listen to someone scratch their nails on the chalkboard than watch it. It'll be great! As you may have guessed, I don't think very highly of Commander Tucker, and to say that he even beats out Tom Paris as the most annoying main character in the Trek history. I honestly can't say any specifics about this episode because I haven't seen it in several years. I'm sorry, but I refuse to force myself to sit through this episode again just for a review. It took me a long time to recover from the traumatic experience of watching this episode, and that's not something I want to repeat. Okay, so enough negativity. Let me get on to where I think Enterprise actually got it right with my top 10 best episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. Number 10 is Shockwave. Although the second part of this two-parter was kind of a letdown, the first part was suspenseful enough to warrant a place in the top 10. And what an amazingly suspenseful episode. With the Enterprise thinking they accidentally killed a whole colony of people, but then discovering they were set up by the Suliban, so with some help from the future, they actually go to them and totally kick their ass and get what they want. But in the end, Archer gets stuck in a post-apocalyptic future, and the Enterprise gets taken over by the Suliban, and one of the most suspenseful cliffhangers in Trek history. And the second part wasn't that bad either, as the Enterprise crew had to struggle to retake the Enterprise from the Suliban. Plus, when Archer travels back to the present, pretending to be that mystery guy, and Silik is sort of asking him to repeat what he says, but then Archer appears and punches him in the face and said, "I said you're an ugly bastard." That's probably the best Archer moment in this series. Alright, number 9 is The Observer Effect. Another suspenseful episode that shows has the origins of the Organians, which is a callback from the original series episode Errand of Mercy, who are highly advanced energy beings who have some kind of prime directive which prohibits them from interfering where Trip and Hoshi are about to die from an unstoppable disease. The tension in this episode was richly awesome and features typical Star Trek guilt-tripping negotiations saying, "Oh, you need to be compassionate like us humans." I love that. Number 8 is Cogenitor, a Trip episode that I actually like, where the fact he's a bumbling idiot actually leads to a very dramatic and intriguing moral dilemma. This episode explores how good intentions don't really mean much when you don't think things through, and also the importance of not judging different cultures based off your own culture. It's a rare gem to be found in Enterprise's second season. Number 7 is Carpenter Street. I love this episode because it's one of the darkest of any Trek series, and definitely the biggest departure. This episode features a shady character who kidnaps prostitutes and other innocent people for money in modern-day Detroit, and is beautifully ties into the Xindi storyline into the time travel episode by having T'Pol and Archer have to fight the reptilians in the past. Definitely a unique episode worth noting. Number 6 is In a Mirror Darkly. Speaking of unique episodes, I'm not sure if they knew Enterprise was being canceled when they came up with this episode, but it was obvious they decided, forget it, let's just have some fun. And this was a pure fanboy episode, the kind of which all Trek series should have been making more of, but they were too scared of alienating general audiences. I'm thrilled they decided to throw caution to the wind and just do it. This storyline wasn't the best or most original, but the opening sequence where they replayed how First Contact would take place in the Mirror Universe, then even going as far to changing the opening credits to a Mirror Universe sequence, and finally showing what the Tholians and the Gorn would look like with 21st century CGI technology, and seeing Archer and the crew walk around in 1960s original series uniforms in the original series type starship, and answering the question of what happened to Defiant from the original episode The Tholian Web, and what caused the disturbance in that episode in the first place. And on top of all that, seeing the evil parallel universe versions of Enterprise crew and the origins of the Mirror Universe made this episode absolutely awesome. Number 5 is Twilight. The best way to describe this episode would be yesterday's Enterprise meets Memento. We're treated to a possible future where the Enterprise actually fails to stop the Xindi from destroying Earth, and in the future where Archer has lost his short-term memory and was out of commission. Seeing humanity turn into a ragtag band of refugees being hunted down by the Xindi and leading to the ultimate struggle, which of course they realize curing Archer's disease will actually erase this grisly events from history and give humanity a second chance. Number 4 is Azati Prime. This exciting mid-season cliffhanger in the season-long Xindi story arc. This is the conclusion to the whole first half of the season, where they've been trying to find the Xindi weapon. Finally, they managed to find it. And then we get a visit to Enterprise J in the future, where we learn the Xindi are actually part of the Federation, and the present-day Xindi are being manipulated by evil trans-dimensional beings who are using the Xindi to take over the galaxy. But after learning this, Archer decides to go on his suicidal mission to destroy the weapon anyway, which fails, and the Enterprise gets the crap beat out of it as it never has before, really upping the ante on the whole Xindi story arc. Number 3 is The Forge, The Awakening, and Kir'Shara, the 3-part Vulcan Revolution episode that explains why the Vulcans aren't dicks anymore. This is an exciting episode with a typical fantasy-like mystical quest, with Archer trying to discover an ancient artifact to bring peace to Vulcan while being possessed by the Katra of the greatest Vulcan who ever lived. While Trip and the Enterprise works to stop a war between Vulcan and Andor. But another reason I love these episodes is for the political commentary in these episodes, which was a bold decision in America in 2005 when this episode came out, where although the Iraq War was losing popularity, it was still generally seen as unpatriotic to question the war or the almighty George Bush. These episodes made a daring statement that admittedly was lost on most people, but when you think about it, this episode was about a corrupt politician who plans to start a war based on false information that their enemy has weapons of mass destruction, which of course no such weapons exist. He just wants to start a war in order to gain power and influence, and at the same time he tries to silence all pacifists who would speak out against this unjust war by labeling them as terrorists. Does that sound familiar? And number 2 is The Council, Countdown, and 0 Hour. I'm not sure if it's technically a 3-parter, but consider it a 3-way tie if you wish. It's the final 3 episodes that finish up the Xindi story arc of Season 3, and boy, does it go out with a bang. The biggest flaw of the Xindi story arc, in my opinion, is that it had such a bad start, but they were obviously saving the best for last. These amazing episodes explored the 5 Xindi races and their internal politics to an intriguing effect, making the Xindi a viable and complex alien feature of the Star Trek franchise. These episodes cranked up the suspense factor by finally resolving the major threat to Earth that had been looming for over a year. The suspense and action built in these episodes were so powerful that frankly it was impossible for the show to top. And my number 1 favorite episode of Star Trek Enterprise is Damage. This episode combines elements of my favorite Voyager episode, Year of Hell, and my second favorite Deep Space Nine episode, In the Pale Moonlight, and adds in a little drug addiction just for good measure. Archer struggled with his decision to attack defenseless, peaceful aliens in order to survive and finish the mission. This was a difficult moral decision that would scar Archer for the rest of the series. On top of all this, T'Pol was going through withdrawals after being addicted to a drug that let her experience emotions. The scene where, while experiencing withdrawal, she confronts Archer about his immoral plan is by far the best scene of the series and one of the best in Trek history, in my opinion.
What if something goes wrong?
We can debate this all day. I've made my decision.
We can't save humanity without holding on to what makes us human. Those were your words to me.
I'm no happier doing this than you are. But we're not gonna make a habit of it.
Once you rationalize the first misstep, it's easy to fall into a pattern of behavior.
I'm not rationalizing anything. I know full well what I'm doing.
I can't justify this course of action.
We don't have a choice.
I won't let you do it!
So, that is my top 10 favorite Enterprise episodes. As I said before, I'll be making more Star Trek videos in the future, so keep an eye out for those, and thanks a lot for watching.